In 1775, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet stating that the freedoms of man can only be maintained by limiting the power of government. The pamphlet was called Common Sense. In 2015, it still is common sense.
I'm Mark Zaccaria.
And I'm Elizabeth Smith. And this is Common Sense. Welcome back. This week, our program will feature an in-depth interview by Representative Patricia Morgan with Mark Curtis, formerly of Channel 6 News. Pat will use the opportunity to get in-depth insights into his experiences here in Little Rhody. Later, we'll hear from our regular commentator, Jeff Richard, to get his take on the lighter side of the Department of Defense spending. And with a far-flung following Mark and I have been attracting for our satire segments, you know we will each be back once or twice to ask the question that's on the tip of everyone's tongue. Are you kidding me? But before that busy schedule gets underway, though, we will start with analysis of some of the news stories Rhode Islanders are talking about this week. Mark?
Thanks, Elizabeth. For a couple of months now, most Rhode Island has been distracted by summer fun, emerging presidential politics, and a variety of Ocean State Pauls figure skating on very thin ethical ice. In other words, it's been a quiet summer. Meanwhile, under the radar, there has been a train wreck on Interstate 195. At last week's regular meeting of the I-195 Redevelopment Commission, during a routine report on the books, Auditor Michael Cawley casually mentioned that the purchase and sale agreement on Parcel 28 had lapsed. With that cat out of the bag, Commission Chairman Joseph F. Azrak was forced to respond to a Providence Journal question. He made the disclosure that Dallas-based Friendship and Clifford LLC has terminated its agreement with the Commission, and with it, its planned $60 million development of student housing on the 1.25-acre plot. No reason was given. Then the Commission heard a report from the Rhode Island Department of Transportation on the delays in creating planned parks on the reclaimed land. RIDOT claimed it had sufficient funds set aside from the original project budget to build a pedestrian bridge and create the public walkways they were tasked to create when the project started, a decade ago. No details were given on how much money is being held in escrow. Neither was any proposed date floated for when the work might be begun, much less completed. Then the Commission had to hold a public vote to formalize its appointment of Peter McNally to replace outgoing Executive Director Jan A. Brody. McNally has been at his new post since September 1st, the only applicant for the opening. That despite the fact that his predecessor was selected from a field of over 200 applicants. Common Cause Executive Director John Marion raised an eyebrow at this stealth HR move. Projo quoted Professor of Political Science and Public Service at Providence College, Joseph Camerano, as saying, more extensive searches are often expected for such an important public post, but Rhode Island's hiring laws tend to be less strict than, quote, a lot of the more professionalized states, unquote. So, a big-time developer from Texas can't make the numbers work on a project in Providence. RIDOT is playing for time to start a project they were paid for 10 years ago. And Commission Chairman Azrak gets to hire an old friend from the 1990s with none of the messy HR process that would ordinarily attend such a big decision. Any place else, the hounds would be baying for blood, saying someone has some splaining to do. But here, you just get the patented Rhode Island eye roll and the explanation that it's been a quiet summer. Liz?
Thanks, Mark. 17 U.S. mayors asked President Obama to please send Syrian refugees. This week, a letter was drafted that asked the president to send displaced Syrian refugees into communities across the United States. The Obama administration accepted over 1,200 refugees this year and plans another 10,000 total in fiscal year 2016. Several cities on that list are in financial dire straits and show an alarming disregard for the economic impact bringing in more individuals will do over time. Central Falls was on that list. Mayor James Diosa says a local church and nonprofit will foot the bill for these families coming into Rhode Island. Well, that might be a starting point, but John DePietro of WPRO made the point last week that here we have a city that's basically being funded by state taxpayers. Go Local Prov indicated in August of this year that state spending in Central Falls was 71.7% of total city budget. That means you and I are footing most of the bill. Who pays for housing, education, and all the other social services once they arrive? Look in the mirror for the answer. And what's the vetting process for these individuals? With the disregard for vetting other immigrants, Kate Steinle's killer comes to mind, is evidence that steps won't be taken to expose their true identity and protect local residents. Now, no one is saying the plight of these people should be ignored, but real questions need to be asked. Can we really afford to take on more with dwindling resources? Will they demand Sharia law be followed, which is in stark contradiction to our Constitution? I question the mayor's motives, as there is a history of turning a blind eye, a history we simply can't afford to repeat. Mark?
Thank you, Elizabeth. In a rare stroke of luck for the hard-working, tax-paying men and women of Rhode Island, House Speaker Nick Mattiello signaled this week that he is now unlikely to call for a fall special session of the General Assembly. I call that good luck because when the legislature is not in session, it can do far less damage to the delicate financial condition of the Ocean State. Pundits, of course, were quick to offer theories as to why this long-planned return trip to the public trough seems to have been canceled. The most generous among the analytical class suggested that support for some of the bills that were said to be the subjects of the extra legislative work were losing steam. It is my earnest hope that what really happened was that the universal howls of shock and condemnation from the taxpayers actually had an impact on the Speaker. What a hopeful sign it would be if that were actually the case. What Speaker Mattiello said was that he had yet to see the documentation he'd asked for as justification for some of the spending measures, so an informed decision could not be made by the chamber. Okay. Could it be that this week's revelations that Mattiello's predecessor had claimed Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination in response to every single question he was asked during his deposition on the 38 Studios bond matter spooked the Speaker on the subject of new bonds for the governor's proposed toll program? Once again, let's hope so. What seems more likely is that the Speaker is engaged in an arm wrestling match with our new governor. If so, he may not be inclined to assist her in another big-ticket feeding frenzy on the taxpayers' tab. We can only hope that part of the Speaker's reticence stems from his gnawing recognition that a perfectly good pay-as-you-go plan has been offered by the Republican caucus. That proposal offers savings of $600 or $700 million in interest payment and fees to get the roads and bridges fixed. So, what may be the most hopeful sign of all is that Nick Mattiello may have heard the often-toned advice of Pat's coach, Bill Belichick, and decided to just do his job. Nah, probably not. Liz?
Yeah, probably not. Thank you, Mark. That wraps up our look at what's happening in news around Rhode Island. But before we move on to Representative Patricia Morgan's featured interview, we'll take a break for a message and a question. Perhaps, are you kidding me? Hello, I'm Glenda the Good Witch. I have news so incredible, you'll say, are you kidding me? Yes, from Progressive Records. It's one of Hollywood's most iconic movies meets Rhode Island politics. Just released, The Wizard of Prov. I know a guy. You can make your friends green with envy every time you hit the play button. This just released title will be heard on Smith Hill when someone arrives on his first day. It's sure to be a hit. We represent the Lollipop League, the Lollipop League, the Lollipop League. We represent the Lollipop League. We'd like to welcome you to the State House. Be still my heart, it's the iconic Ding Dong, the deal is dead. The Pawsox now, where do they head? Ding Dong, the wicked deal is dead. Daloot, 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 doo, doo. And who could forget this little ditty from Cell Block 15 by the Speaker Fox? If I were king of the State House. No Oz-themed album would be complete without the iconic We's off to see the wizard, the wonderful wizard of Prav, where favors fly. I know a guy, a pension for you and I. For 3 easy payments, you'll say, "Nuh-uh." Are you kidding me? To the governor's theme.
Due to scheduling changes, the interview with Mark Curtis will air next week. This week, join Mark Zaccaria as he interviews Patricia Morgan on the subject of no tolling, as proposed by the Republican Policy Group this week.
I'm Mark Zaccaria. This is Common Sense TV. Welcome back. Common Sense is the show that tries to make sense out of the policies that affect your life. This week, we are interviewing Representative Patricia Morgan on the subject of the Republican Policy Group, which she heads in the House. You all know Rep. Morgan quite well from her work interviewing others. We're turning the tables on her a bit today. Rep. Morgan, thank you for being here.
It's nice being here. Be kind.
So not to be as hard as you are. Okay, got it. I will. The Republican Policy Group. Tell us just a little bit about what it is.
It is a group that we have begun up in the State House of Republican legislators. And last year, we did a study on the Convention Center Authority. At that time, it was just House Republicans. This summer, we actually expanded it and asked Senate Republicans to join us. So now it's Republicans up in the State House. You know, we've, I think, unfairly been labeled as the party of no. We have great ideas. Republicans have great ideas on how to make Rhode Island a better place for people to live, and how to repair our broken economic climate. And so for me and for us, it was about bringing together a vehicle where we could actually study things that we saw as problems, study them thoroughly, get the details, and then present it to the folks without having Democrat leadership stomp on us.
For years, pundits have suggested that here in Rhode Island we suffer from the lack of a true two-party system. I see this invigorated Republican Policy Group as kind of a step in that direction. Would you agree?
Absolutely. You know, we put in bills all the time. Republicans put bills in all the time. They're great bills. We sponsor them. And then very quickly, a Democrat comes out with the same bill and gets to pass it. And that's happened over and over again. I want Republicans to get credit for our ideas, quite frankly, because I think the people out there need to know that really good ideas come from Republicans. For instance, the elimination of this income tax on Social Security. That was a Republican idea. Every Democrat took credit for it, but it was our idea, and it never would have come to the surface unless we had proposed it.
So you're fighting a two-front battle then. You're not only trying to put effective legislation out there for all of the hardworking men and women of Rhode Island, you're also fighting a PR battle to make sure that the voters understand who's trying to help them out.
It's that because of what you said earlier. Right now, we don't have a two-party system in Rhode Island. And I think that the really stagnant economy that we have now, all the problems that we're seeing in Rhode Island, can be traced back to the fact that Democrats have had this overwhelming majority for 60 years. If we really had a two-party system where there was a give and a take, where all of us could use our energies, our intellect, our effort to bring good things to the people of Rhode Island, we'd have a better Rhode Island.
So what you're suggesting is that maybe the majority has gotten a little nonchalant after years and years and years of overwhelming power and doesn't have to think as hard about what's best for the average taxpayer.
What I'm suggesting is Republicans bring good ideas, good policy, good management skills to government. And I'm hoping that the people of Rhode Island will give us a look, because they're going to see when we have a vehicle to do it, we bring good things out for the people of Rhode Island.
Speaking of good policy initiatives, right now you are working on a counterproposal to the governor's suggestion that we need toll gantries all over the state. to try and raise money so that that money can be used for infrastructure repair on roads and bridges. Would you tell us a little bit about that counterproposal?
Yeah, there is nobody in the state who doesn't believe that bridges need to be repaired. You go around the state, you see bridges being held up with timbers, right? You look above on overpasses and you see rust and scaling cement. We all believe that bridges need to be repaired. Earlier last session, in the springtime, I actually asked the DOT director, Peter Alviti, to come to our office, our House Republican office, and talk with us about the governor's proposal. He made it so clear that, in fact, he said he cringes when he goes over some bridges in Rhode Island. He holds his breath because he knows they're in such bad shape. And he said that if we didn't get them repaired, that people were going to be seriously hurt. He was saying that he thought bridges had the real possibility of falling in Rhode Island. So there is not one person in the House caucus, in the Republican caucus, Senate or House, that doesn't believe that bridges need to be repaired.
In fact, don't you have a proposal to do it fairer, faster, and funnier, and at less expense?
That's right. We think it has to be a priority. What we differ with is how we're going to pay for it. The governor, 3 weeks before the end of session, came out with, we need to toll all of Rhode Island's highways. She's talking about multiple gantries on 95, 295, 195, the 610 connector. Curiously, the Saconnet River Bridge was left out of this. And that was funny because we had just fought this battle with the Saconnet River Bridge when there was testimony about how that would hurt the economy to toll that one bridge. And the toll was going to be 37 cents, 38 cents, 75 cents a day. And that was going to hurt the economy, irreparably hurt the economy. And we agreed to that and didn't put tolls on the Saconnet River Bridge. And yet now the governor was proposing to raise $80 to $100 million a year from tolls on all the other highways.
Of that $80 to $100 million per year she was proposing to raise through tolls, how much of it would actually be used on the roads?
Well, there's the issue. When you really look at tolling, and again, it's a cynical proposal in my opinion. First of all, I just think tolls are the wrong way to go, and we can talk about that. But it was cynical because it was going to be revenue bonds issued by the Turnpike and Bridge Authority, which meant Rhode Islanders didn't get a say on it. Real similar to those moral obligation bonds. We don't want to hear your opinion. We're just going to have the Turnpike Authority, the Bridge and Turnpike Authority issue bonds, and there's where you come up with it. When you issue bonds, you're taking on interest payments. Wall Street will love it. And honestly, I'm a financial advisor. I have no problem with people making money. But in this case, I don't think taxpayers should be paying half of the money we're tolling for interest.
We just have a short time left before our first break, but one of the things that I want to hear from you is that there's a better way without those kinds of fees and interests, and in a nutshell, what would that be?
We take the money out of our current budget. And listen, we have a budget in Rhode Island of $8.7 billion. The money the governor suggests that we need for bridge repair is less than 1%.
So you think the money is there to be found. We'll talk a little bit more about that after the break, but first, ladies and gentlemen, stand by. I think someone's going to ask a question. That question might be, are you kidding me? When you catch a 3-year-old with his hand in the cookie jar, you make him confess right away and take his punishment. It's a good lesson for the offending toddler and a better one for any of his siblings who might be looking on. So, why shouldn't the same be true for the gang that brought us 38 Studios? Are you kidding me? Think about it. The former speaker is in jail following a guilty plea in the matter. But still, there are surrogates like Wells Fargo's bank in courtroom maneuvers to block the release of documents originally sealed in that now-resolved case. The result? Drip, drip, drip. The information is being released in a slow-motion parade of who's who of Ocean State politics. What did then Finance Chair Costantino know, and when did he know it? Why did then Majority Whip Kill Martin work so hard to keep his caucus on the party line for this last-minute shadowy vote? Why was Keith Stokes and his Economic Development Corporation suddenly bestowed with spending authority far beyond anything contemplated in its charter, and just a month or two after there had been serious discussions about disbanding EDC? Haven't these guys learned anything from the death of 1,000 cuts that's now being suffered by then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton? Her approval ratings have plummeted with the agonizing and drawn-out series of disclosures over her role in the Benghazi tragedy and her use of a private server for public, if secret, documents. Like her, the gang that couldn't shoot straight here in Little Rhody should just get it over with in one fell swoop so the healing process can begin. Trouble is, none of the political insiders in the state legislature have ever been held to account for anything they did for themselves with the taxpayers' money. When they were 3 and made a move for that illicit cookie, all they got was a slap on the wrist and a few minutes sitting in the corner. Now we're talking about losing their law licenses and sitting in the hoosgow for a few years. There is zero chance any of them will fess up with that hanging over them. And what about their siblings in the House or the Senate who are looking on and seeing the big boys getting away with it? Folks, that's not even the worst of it. What about you and me? Collectively, we observe these insider dealings, but instead of screaming bloody murder, we let it go. And we even pay the tab for all that extra vigorish. Hey, that's got to stop. Are you kidding me? I'm Mark Zaccaria. This is Common Sense TV. Welcome back. Common Sense is the show that tries to make sense out of the policies that affect your life. This week, we are interviewing Representative Patricia Morgan on the subject of the Republican Policy Group, which she heads in the House. You all know Rep. Morgan quite well from her work interviewing others. We're turning the tables on her a bit today. Rep. Morgan, thank you for being here.
It's nice being here. Be kind.
So not to be as hard as you are. Okay, got it. I will. The Republican Policy Group. Tell us just a little bit about what it is.
It is a group that we have begun up in the State House of Republican legislators. And last year, we did a study on the Convention Center Authority. At that time, it was just House Republicans. This summer, we actually expanded it and asked Senate Republicans to join us. So now it's Republicans up in the State House. You know, we've, I think, unfairly been labeled as the party of no. We have great ideas. Republicans have great ideas on how to make Rhode Island a better place for people to live, and how to repair our broken economic climate. And so for me and for us, it was about bringing together a vehicle where we could actually study things that we saw as problems, study them thoroughly, get the details, and then present it to the folks without having Democrat leadership stomp on us.
For years, pundits have suggested that here in Rhode Island we suffer from the lack of a true two-party system. I see this invigorated Republican Policy Group as kind of a step in that direction. Would you agree?
Absolutely. You know, we put in bills all the time. Republicans put bills in all the time. They're great bills. We sponsor them. And then very quickly, a Democrat comes out with the same bill and gets to pass it. And that's happened over and over again. I want Republicans to get credit for our ideas, quite frankly, because I think the people out there need to know that really good ideas come from Republicans. For instance, the elimination of this income tax on Social Security. That was a Republican idea. Every Democrat took credit for it, but it was our idea, and it never would have come to the surface unless we had proposed it.
So you're fighting a two-front battle then. You're not only trying to put effective legislation out there for all of the hardworking men and women of Rhode Island, you're also fighting a PR battle to make sure that the voters understand who's trying to help them out.
It's that because of what you said earlier. Right now, we don't have a two-party system in Rhode Island. And I think that the really stagnant economy that we have now, all the problems that we're seeing in Rhode Island, can be traced back to the fact that Democrats have had this overwhelming majority for 60 years. If we really had a two-party system where there was a give and a take, where all of us could use our energies, our intellect, our effort to bring good things to the people of Rhode Island, we'd have a better Rhode Island.
So what you're suggesting is that maybe the majority has gotten a little nonchalant after years and years and years of overwhelming power and doesn't have to think as hard about what's best for the average taxpayer.
What I'm suggesting is Republicans bring good ideas, good policy, good management skills to government. And I'm hoping that the people of Rhode Island will give us a look, because they're going to see when we have a vehicle to do it, we bring good things out for the people of Rhode Island.
Speaking of good policy initiatives, right now you are working on a counterproposal to the governor's suggestion that we need toll gantries all over the state to try and raise money so that money can be used for infrastructure repair on roads and bridges. Would you tell us a little bit about that counterproposal?
Yeah. There is nobody in the state who doesn't believe that bridges need to be repaired. You go around the state, you see bridges being held up with timbers, right? You look above on overpasses and you see rust and scaling cement. We all believe that bridges need to be repaired. Earlier last session, in the springtime, I actually asked the DOT director, Peter Alviti, to come to our office, our House Republican office, and talk with us about the governor's proposal. He made it so clear that, in fact, he said he cringes when he goes over some bridges in Rhode Island. He holds his breath because he knows they're in such bad shape. And he said that if we didn't get them repaired, that people were going to be seriously hurt. He was saying that he thought bridges had the real possibility of falling in Rhode Island. So there is not one person in the House caucus, in the Republican caucus, Senate or House, that doesn't believe that bridges need to be repaired.
In fact, don't you have a proposal to do it fairer, faster, and funnier, and at less expense?
That's right. We think it has to be a priority. What we differ with is how we're going to pay for it. The governor, 3 weeks before the end of session, came out with, we need to toll all of Rhode Island's highways. She's talking about multiple gantries on 95, 295, 195, the 610 connector. Curiously, the Saconnet River Bridge was left out of this. And that was funny because we had just fought this battle with the Saconnet River Bridge when there was testimony about how that would hurt the economy to toll that one bridge. And the toll was going to be 37 cents, 38 cents, 75 cents a day. And that was going to hurt the economy, irreparably hurt the economy. And we agreed to that and didn't put tolls on the Saconnet River Bridge. And yet now the governor was proposing to raise $80 to $100 million a year from tolls on all the other highways.
Of that $80 to $100 million per year she was proposing to raise through tolls, how much of it would actually be used on the roads?
Well, there's the issue. When you really look at tolling, and again, it's a cynical proposal in my opinion. First of all, I just think tolls are the wrong way to go, and we can talk about that. But it was cynical because it was going to be revenue bonds issued by the Turnpike and Bridge Authority, which meant Rhode Islanders didn't get a say on it. Real similar to those moral obligation bonds. We don't want to hear your opinion. We're just going to have the Turnpike Authority, the Bridge and Turnpike Authority, issue bonds, And there's where you come up with it. When you issue bonds, you're taking on interest payments. Wall Street will love it. And honestly, I'm a financial advisor. I have no problem with people making money. But in this case, I don't think taxpayers should be paying half of the money we're tolling for interest.
We just have a short time left before our first break, but one of the things that I want to hear from you is that there's a better way without those kinds of fees and interests, and in a nutshell, what would that be?
We take the money out of our current budget. And listen, we have a budget in Rhode Island of $8.7 billion. The money the governor suggests that we need for bridge repair is less than 1%.
So you think the money is there to be found. We'll talk a little bit more about that after the break, but first, ladies and gentlemen, stand by. I think someone's going to ask a question. That question might be, are you kidding me?
Hi there, I'm Blythe. I'm here to set the record straight. I mean, are you kidding me? There's a lot of misinformation out there about the Democratic Party you may not be aware of. For instance, why in the world would you think we don't like freedom when we love freedom? You know, the freedom to do whatever we want. Oh yes, that pipeline idea the Republicans keep tossing around. We support pipelines. Our preferred pipeline is the secret information pipeline. It's all underground. You don't even know it's there until it leaks. Thanks, Hillary. We know she's working on it. And why in the world would you ever think we were against the American dream? We think you would be better off with 700 square feet of living area, less to clean and less yard to keep up. When we send eminent and domain to your home to enforce compliance, it's just for your own good. This applies, of course, to you little people. Speaking of yards, we can't wait to introduce you to all these new little people coming into the country. We want to sustain green living areas with your help. You say we need to screen these people? Well, we believe the only screens belong in those cute little houses you'll be staring out of after your cannabis binge. My husband Blaine and I look forward to a holiday on the Hamps while you ride mass transit to wherever you people go. Oh, an email from Hillary. I simply must respond. Oh, are you kidding me? Ta.
I'm Mark Zaccaria. This is Common Sense TV. Welcome back. We're interviewing today our regular interviewer, Representative Patricia Morgan. Rep. Morgan, thank you for coming down and talking a little bit about the Republican Policy Group and its counterproposal to the governor's tolling suggestion that we raise revenue for road and bridge repair here in Rhode Island.
I think it's an important topic that people need to know about.
Well, we've been getting into the details, and what we've heard so far is that when the governor's proposal came up really at the last hour in the last session of the legislature, the Republican Policy Group had precious little time to come up and say, wait a minute, stop, we're talking about less than 1% of our state budget, we ought to be able to find that. Well,
there's that much in waste, but...
Well, now some time has passed, and you've done some real due diligence and refined your proposal, have you not?
We have.
Let's talk a little bit more about what that proposal now is after you've had the chance to look at it and how it compares to the revenue sources that we're talking about with the governor.
Yeah, again, we talked about it before the break. Our proposal doesn't rely on any new revenue, none. No tolls, which I thought was incredibly important for the people of Rhode Island. There's just too many negatives associated with tolling.
So on one side of the ledger we got zero. Let's talk about the other side. What's the governor proposing?
The governor is proposing tolling and taking $60 to $80 million a year, of which half would go to interest, gantry construction, credit card fees, all stuff that really doesn't repair bridges. If you take the money right out of the money we already collect from Rhode Islanders, there is no impact on our economy. right? Because we're already paying it. We're just moving it around and using it for what I think is a higher purpose.
One might argue that we would improve the economy because without potholes, maybe more people will drive through.
With bridges that we can be assured are not going to crumble and fall, we will have a better economic outlook. And that's it. Again, we all believe that bridges need to be repaired. And this is about getting them repaired in a manner that makes them more affordable, cost-effective for taxpayers.
And doesn't put a $60 to $80 million hit on the quality of life here in Rhode Island.
That's right. And as we were choosing areas in our current spending, it always was our top priority to go back to what Director of DOT, Alvidi, said. He cringes when he goes over some bridges. He holds his breath. And that if we don't do something now, if we don't make it a priority, that people will get hurt. That's unacceptable. So when we chose these sources, that was the number one. Which is more important? Is it more important the safety of travelers in our state or this particular project? And I mean, we do it in our home budgets all the time, Mark, right?
Sure.
We have priorities. Would we like a new car? Yes, everybody would like a Ferrari or a Porsche in their driveway. But you have to prioritize food, care for your children, all those things. And so you put away other spending and make sure that you use your money for the things that have the highest priority. State government needs to do that too. So, you ask, what are some of the targets? You want to ask what some of the targets are?
Absolutely.
Okay. In her proposal, and we agreed with the governor on this, there are things called Garvey bonds. Garvey bonds is the money that the federal government gave us or loaned to us for the construction of the I-Way. That was a very, very expensive project, and that's all bonded. And we still owe about $257 million on those bonds. The governor suggested that in this low interest environment that we're in, that we refinance them, that we stretch them out further into the future. And in doing that, we can free up $120 million right now. Because of the dire condition of our bridges, we are concurring with her. We're going to go down that road with her.
And that low interest rate would be locked in despite what happens with the Fed going forward? It's a hard rate, it's not floating?
That's right. We're actually stretching it out. We're putting more years on it to get the money now. But again, when you're talking about bridges maybe collapsing with
Sure.
travelers on them, I think you have to go down that road. You have to say it's a priority. So it raises $120 million, and for the first 4 years, we're going to use $30 million a year from that money to fund bridges. Well, that left us with another 30 to 40 million to raise. And so we looked at some other things, and one of those I think that the people will agree with is all the DMV, Division of Motor Vehicle Fees, that we have raised. Do you know that we have raised DMV fees 40% in 2 years' time? And every time we've raised them, we have promised that that money is going to be used for bridge repair. In fact, it was part of the Sakonnet River Bridge getting rid of their tolling over there. That the money that we were going to raise from these increased fees, we have increased registration fees, licensing renewals, our gas tax is now tied to inflation, so it's going to go up a penny every 2 years.
The gas tax, if I may interrupt, was originally there specifically for repair of roads and bridges. I mean, it's the tax paid by motorists to use the infrastructure, and theoretically was there to do. Is any of that going to roads and bridges today?
It's in the general fund right now.
Okay.
So it needs to be sequestered for bridges. Our bridges are in bad shape. We need to take that money for bridges. We promised people Actually, I voted against it because I didn't think we should be raising all these fees. But now that they're raised, and the promise from the Democrats was that we were going to take this money and use it for bridge and roads, we're saying, okay, we agree. It should be for roads and bridges.
So what you're saying then is that between the DMV fees that were always supposed to be used for this purpose but aren't, and the gasoline taxes, which were always supposed to be used for this purpose but aren't, you're finding that the $30 or $40 million per year that you need to do this is there? It's going to be relatively simple?
24 million in the first year, and then remember, gas tax is now tied to inflation, so every 2 years that goes up. This year it's 24 million, next year it'll be 37 million, then it goes to 43 million for 2 years, then it goes to 51 million for another 2 years. This is an increasing stream, and we say, okay, our travelers are paying those extra gas taxes, let's use them for bridge repair.
Well, it sounds like you've done your homework since this thing was dropped on you at the end of the last session, and you've used the summer wisely with the Republican policy group to really drill into the numbers and find out that it can be. I hope that what our viewers take away is that the money is really there if we have a little political will to use it for what, I don't know, it was originally intended for.
That's right. The money is there. And there's some other things that we have, and we can talk in the next segment about it. There's some other sources that we've gotten, which we think are, we can get a higher value for taxpayers by eliminating certain programs and using them for bridge repair.
A higher value for taxpayers? Is that what I just heard? That's wonderful. Listen, we'll talk more after the break, but right now we are going to step away for some important messages and, of course, the important question, are you kidding me? With the 38 Studios postmortem blowing up in everyone's face on Smith Hill, it seems only logical that common sense continue to analyze that story. But where do you start? And how much time do we have to cover all of the miscues? Are you kidding me? Once again, folks, it is sad but true. With the publication of previously sealed court documents this week, we are now seeing why so many of our elected officials spend so much time trying to prevent us from learning any of these details. So, let me speed read a partial list of 38 Studios headlines from just this week. Former Speaker Gordon Fox met with 38 Studios board members months before there was any public suggestion that a deal was possible. Then, House Finance Chair Stephen Costantino authored an idea that a teeny loan guarantee program overseen by EDC could be ramped up to the $75 million level to fund 38 Studios. How'd that work out? Kurt Schilling was never deposed in the investigation. I wonder what they know that they don't want us to know. Fox insider Michael Corso may have been paid $2.3 million by 38 Studios to broker the deal. Then Governor Lincoln Chafee wanted the entire issue to just go away, so he forbade contact with 38 Studios just when it was starting to fail. The state paid for a damning independent review of 38 Studios' finances and business plan, which EDC promptly ignored. And even today, the Attorney General says the investigation is ongoing. Really? What a great way to remain silent. Are you getting the general picture? Mike Stenhouse of the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity summed it up this way, quote, crooked leaders of one branch of government conspiring with corrupt leaders in other branches of government to secure a sweetheart deal for a third-party special interest, unquote. You'll note that Stenhouse makes no mention of the taxpayers in his assessment. Larry the Cable Guy was more to the point. He said, and I quote, the real reason that we can't have the Ten Commandments displayed in the State House is this. You cannot post, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, and thou shalt not lie in a building full of lawyers, judges, and politicians. It creates a hostile work environment. Unquote. Are you kidding me? I'm Mark Zaccaria. This is Common Sense TV. It's the show where we try to make sense out of the policies that affect your life. Welcome back. We are here today interviewing Representative Patricia Morgan, who is normally in the other seat, so to speak, But today, Rep, we're talking about something near and dear to your heart, the Republican Policy Group, and especially the one policy on the front burner right now, the counter-proposal to the governor's suggestions that we need tolls on our highways to pay for bridge and road infrastructure. So thank you for coming down and spending time with us for that.
I'm really pleased to be here because I think the Republicans and the Republican Policy Group think tolls are just the very, very worst way for us to fund our bridges.
If I'm not mistaken, you proved that yesterday in a State House press conference that you conducted, where you announced the details of this plan. And today you're here, of course, to help us follow up with that and push it more. This is going to be a public relations battle as much as it's going to be a political battle, is it not?
It is, but this is the bottom line. The Republican proposal puts more money into repairing bridges than the governor's proposal does. And we do it with existing funds, money that we're already taking from taxpayers. So by doing that, we also save the taxpayers $1.3 billion in additional taxes or tolls. A toll is just another name for a tax. So we're saving taxpayers $1.3 billion and getting more money into bridge repair.
Politically, is that enough? I think the answer to that question is no, and you're going to need some help from these people that we're saving this money for, the taxpayers themselves.
Unfortunately, because Democrats dominate the State House, they think they can do just about anything they want. But that's where the people come in, right? I have gone now and surveyed my district. I know other Republicans have been talking to their constituents and surveying their constituents about this very issue. And I have not found one person who thinks we should be putting 17 to 22 gantries all around Rhode Island. They know that it's a bad thing for our economy, it's a bad thing for our jobs climate, it's a bad thing for them as consumers. It's just going to be a tax. They all understand that. Those folks, the average folks that are out there, they need to start calling their representatives and their senators and telling them no tolls. Don't put tolls in Rhode Island. Don't approve the governor's plan. If they get up and do that, we can prevail because the money is there. We're talking about less than 1% of our budget. Certainly we can put 1% of our budget towards bridge repair.
But we all understand how things kind of happen politically in Rhode Island without necessarily the best interests of the hardworking, tax-paying men and women of the Ocean State being considered. This thing has some political inertia. There are big money interests that want it. They want to feed at that trough. So absent the kind of hue and cry we heard about the Passauk Stadium in Providence, do you think it can be stopped?
Well, we need some hue and cry, so let me put out that word. We need people to get engaged in government again. I think, again, I go door to door and I talk to everybody in my district, and I think people feel that they're too small, they're too powerless to do anything. They are not. The opposition to 38 studios, the opposition to that horrible overtime bill for firefighters came from people, just average people who picked up the phone, wrote an email, got in touch with their legislature, called the governor, called the speaker and the Senate president, and they were both stopped. People do have power, but they have to get engaged. The Republicans have put forward a good plan. It works, right? It gives more money to bridges, and it doesn't take any more money, no more money from the people of the state. But the people have to get engaged, and they have to say, we like that one. Let's not do tolling.
In our last segment, we talked about a couple of the major areas where the money was going to be taken out of existing income and moved from where it's being used today to being used for this road infrastructure. And primarily, we talked about sources that have always been aimed at that, the DMV fees and the gas tax. There are a number of other smaller things that I think people would be incensed if they understood we're paying it all. And so diverting those funds away is probably an easy thing. Is there any corporate welfare in our existing budget?
Well, the Twin Rivers, there's a $500,000 there, $500,000 that we are giving to Twin Rivers. Listen, I understand there are our third largest source of revenues, gaming is. That being said, this is a company that just bought Newport Grand. They knew what they were buying. Do we have to give them half a million dollars? That's giving money to a business concern and saying that that's more important than fixing our bridges. We don't think so. We think that corporate welfare should have no place in our budget, and especially when people can get hurt if we don't fix our bridges.
And not be able to get to Twin Rivers.
And that too. And there are other things. You know that the Republican Policy Group, we studied the Rhode Island Convention Center Authority. This year, the Convention Center Authority is taking over $30 million from the state's taxpayers. In our report, which we released last spring, we said they can do better. They can do a lot better. And we're starting them out small. We're saying, we want you to restructure your spending, your expenses, your operations, or make more profit. You choose, make more profit, or figure out how to do things more efficiently in your organization. We're asking them for $1.5 million, and that will climb by $250,000 for every year over the 10 years. We think they can do it. We think they have to be held accountable.
$1.5 million out of the $30 million that we give them right out of our state revenues every single year.
Yeah, I think they can do it.
Doesn't sound like a lot to me.
I think they just need to pay attention and do it. Our study pointed out a lot of problems in their operations. They need to correct, and if they do that, we can not only get the $1.5 million, but they may actually generate more economic activity for our economy.
Are there any other areas that our listeners might consider are particularly egregious?
Well, we also looked at the film tax credits, which we think needs to be pared down so that some of that money can go for bridges. We're not eliminating the program. We're just saying, let's take some of that money and put it into bridges. And then we have the State House.
I was going to go there.
All right. It's called the Joint Committee on Legislative Services. That's the money that taxpayers pay to run the State House. We are a part-time legislature. We actually meet from January through June, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we meet 60 to 70 days a year. In the last 12 years, our budget has grown 60%. We now spend over $41 million a year for a part-time legislature. And that's just way too much money.
So you think there's a little bit of money there that could be used for the better purpose of roads and bridges?
Absolutely. It's a choice between bridges falling down and hurting people. And even if people don't get hurt because they're not traveling across the bridge at that time, remember the dislocation when they closed the bridge up in Pawtucket? That has a huge impact on our economy. So that's the choice. Either fix the bridges or allow all of this money to be spent for a part-time legislature. We're taking $4 million.
Let me sum everything up, if I may, because we have to close it up now.
Okay.
We're up against the clock as usual. What we have is a proposal to pay as you go versus a proposal that will take $1.3 billion at least of new taxes out of your pockets and mine. And then we have a proposal that we've sort of tried to prove here today actually can find the money to put more on the surfaces of the roads and the bridges than the governor's proposal would. The only downfall to it seems to be it's coming from the Republican Policy Group rather than the leadership of the House, if I may say. I know you're too much of a diplomat.
I'm an optimist.
There you go. So, folks, look at the papers. Hear about the press conference that the Republican Policy Group held yesterday, and let's all get behind doing with what we've got today rather than spending new money that we don't have. It's been common sense. Thanks to Representative Patricia Morgan for coming down. See you next time.
The Department of Defense recently issued its annual report that lets us all see what was spent state by state during the 2014 budget year. And as you would suspect, every state in the Union got a piece of the action. After all, we all have to have National Guard units. Now, the total spending was $418 billion on payroll and contracts in the United States. Now, that number represented 2.4% of the U.S. gross domestic product, that is GDP. But of course, the total DoD budget for 2014 was $581.4 billion. But I guess the fact we spent 20% of our GDP on social spending makes the DoD budget seem small. So why is this important to Rhode Island? Well, if a state depends too much on federal defense dollars and all of a sudden these dollars go away, there is an immediate impact. In fact, the projections suggest a declining number of dollars will be available to the states from the Department of Defense. And that would mean we need to be very aware of how DoD manages life in Little Rhody. Now, the numbers that show up in the report give a quick summary of how the money gets dispersed. The report lists contracts by type, R&D, research and development, construction, supplies and equipment, and services. Then the top contractors are listed with the value of the contract awards performed. It lists the personnel numbers and their cost by type: Reserve, National Guard, civilian, and active duty. And then the report lists spending in top locations by county that got the money. Now, I decided to compare Rhode Island with a couple of states that happen to be alphabetically linked: Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island. Oregon was 43rd on the list in receipts. Pennsylvania was 6th, and we were 38th. So how much money are we talking about? The Oregonians got $1.2 billion, but that represented only 0.5 of their state GDP. So they were 51st in that department, meaning they got $290 per resident. But in Pennsylvania, they did really well, receiving $14.2 billion. But their percentage of GDP was much higher than Oregon's at 2.2%. Now, they got $1,112 per resident. Now, how did we do? We got $2.1 billion, but the more important number is that represented 3.8% of our state GDP. Now, we got $1,948 per resident. What that means is any drop in DoD spending in Rhode Island will have a disproportionate effect on our state budget. The report does list all the states, so I thought I would see where DoD spends most of its money. Number 1 is Virginia, with 11.8% of their state GDP. Of course, they have the largest naval base in the world in Norfolk. Then there was D.C., that number 4, getting 5.8% of its GDP. Of course, they have the Pentagon. And the top states for total defense spending were Virginia at $54.7 billion, California with $52.5 billion, and down the list to Massachusetts at number 9 with $12.1 billion. Now, why is Mass getting the bucks? Well, they have Raytheon, which got $3.7 billion, MIT, which got $1.5 billion, General Dynamics got $1.3 billion, and down the list to Brigham Marine Health Center, which got a mere $133.1 million. Now, I went there once to get allergy shots when Newport Naval Clinic stopped giving them. And so our neighbors to the north are getting more spending than we get. It was instructive to note in their report that in Rhode Island, 92% of the contracts were Navy. Army, 2%, Air Force, zip. Now, the Mass folks were 34% Army, only 24% Navy. I think Raytheon missiles have much to do with that. Now, we are a Navy state, in case you were lost in space for the last few years. We have 5,105 personnel in Newport County alone, by far the top county. Smallest is Bristol County with 505. Our people are 37% Reserve National Guard, 36% civilian, and 27% active. The 12,328 of us account for a payroll of $754.3 million. That is big money. I thought it would be nice if our state had a bunch of Republicans in the Congress so they could work at keeping or expanding the DO slice of the pie. Alas, we only have representation from the minority party, giving a very diminished opportunity for more federal dollars. Maybe the next election will solve that problem and we can get someone in that will be seriously listened to. We need DoD spending here in Rhode Island. Thank you for listening, and God bless.